On Christmas morning, Father stood, snapped, and Mom hissed, "Stop envying your sister now." Dad yelled, "Paying bills doesn't buy you any place in this family." I smiled, "Then pay your own." Next day, Dad called the police. Officer saw the files. He turned to Dad and delivered 4 crushing words: "You are under arrest." They panicked instantly. They thought they could use my own success against me, twisting every achievement into a flaw. But that Christmas, I finally gave them a gift they never expected: the raw, undeniable truth. That Christmas morning, the scent of cinnamon rolls hung heavy in the air, a sweet lie masking the bitter chill that always settled over our family gatherings. While their laughter echoed from the living room, bright and sharp, I stood alone in the kitchen, pouring my coffee, feeling like an echo myself, present but utterly unheard. My sister, Ava, was on the couch, her kids a whirlwind of wrapping paper around the tree, while her husband, Daniel, made half-hearted attempts to wrangle them. My mom, Susan, perched on the edge of my dad, Robert's, recliner, admiring a diamond bracelet Ava had just given her. "Another beautiful gift, sweetheart," Mom cooed, twisting her wrist to catch the light. "You always know exactly what I want." I carried my coffee in, settling into the chair farthest from the joyous chaos. Nobody even glanced up. The kids ripped into presents, a flurry of discarded bows and ribbons. Daniel handed Ava a small, velvet box. Inside, pearl earrings that probably cost more than my month's rent. "Gorgeous," she shrieked, kissing him. Dad cleared his throat, his voice heavy with implication. "Must be nice having a husband who takes care of you properly." The words hung in the festive air, thick and unwelcome. I just sipped my coffee. Years of these little jabs had taught me that any response only made me a bigger target. My crime, apparently, was being 32, unmarried, childless, and shamelessly career-focused. In their eyes, I'd failed at the only things that truly mattered. "Some of us prefer independence," I finally murmured, my voice barely audible above the wrapping paper rustle. Mom snorted. "Independence? Is that what we're calling it now?" Ava, ever the star, then pulled a large envelope from beneath the tree and presented it to our parents with a theatrical flourish. "We wanted to do something special this year." Dad opened it, his eyes scanning the contents before widening. "A cruise to Alaska?" "Ava, this is too much." Daniel, ever the supportive spouse, draped his arm around her. "Nothing's too much for you two. You've done so much for us." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted metal. They had done so much for Ava. Paid for her lavish wedding, helped with the down payment on their house, provided endless free childcare. But 8 years ago, when I'd timidly asked to borrow money for a security deposit on my first apartment, Dad had launched into a 20-minute lecture on fiscal responsibility before flat-out refusing. The gift exchange continued. Ava received a designer purse, a new tablet, and countless toys for her children. Daniel got a golf club set he'd apparently been coveting. My turn came. I handed out my modest contributions: a cookbook for Mom, a biography for Dad, educational games for the kids, and a scarf for Ava. "How thoughtful," she said, in that tone that somehow made thoughtful sound like a profound insult. No one had a gift for me under the tree. It wasn't a surprise. It hadn't been for years, not since I stopped pretending their blatant favoritism didn't sting. They called me difficult, ungrateful, jealous of Ava's happiness. But the truth was simpler. I refused to play along with their toxic fantasy of a perfect family. After the gifts, Mom announced brunch. We moved to the dining room, where she'd laid out enough food for an army: ham, eggs, pastries, fruit, the works. Everyone piled their plates high, gushing about Ava's new promotion at the marketing firm where she worked part-time. "Regional director." Dad beamed. "My daughter, the regional director." I offered a strained, "Congratulations." Ava smiled tightly. "Thanks. Not all of us can be satisfied with middle management, right?" I, Chloe, was a senior financial analyst at a major corporation, a position I'd earned through years of grueling work and 2 master's degrees I paid for myself. But in this house, my accomplishments evaporated like morning dew. Halfway through the meal, Dad glanced at his phone, a frown deepening the lines on his face. Credit card bill just posted. Jesus Christ, the heating costs this month. Daniel offered a sympathetic, winter's expensive. Mom sighed dramatically, a theatrical production in itself. Everything keeps getting more expensive. I don't know how we're supposed to manage. The performance had begun. I'd seen it countless times, these carefully orchestrated complaints designed to make me feel guilty. The thing was, my parents weren't struggling. Dad had retired with a full pension. Mom had never worked outside the home. They owned their modest house outright for 15 years. But 4 months ago, they'd made a series of spectacularly bad decisions. First, they co-signed on a boat Daniel wanted but couldn't quite afford. Then, they took out a home equity loan to renovate their kitchen with top-of-the-line appliances. After that came a timeshare in Florida, a new car for Mom, and a string of expensive trips. Suddenly, their comfortable retirement had become a house of cards. We might have to cut back on groceries, Mom continued, pushing food around her plate. Maybe start buying generic brands. Dad nodded gravely. Could be worse. At least we have family who cares about us. The implication hung heavy in the air. I was supposed to offer help. I was supposed to open my wallet and solve their self-created problems while they continued treating me like an inconvenient stranger who happened to share their DNA. Instead, I simply asked Daniel to pass the salt. The conversation moved on, but the tension remained. Ava described their upcoming Cancun vacation. The twins begged for more presents, and Mom complained about her sister, Brenda, never calling. Normal family chaos, except I was a ghost at the table, present but completely invisible. After brunch, while everyone else relaxed in the living room, I started cleaning up. Mom wandered into the kitchen as I loaded the dishwasher. "You could be more engaged," she said, her tone sharp. I straightened up, facing her. "I've been here all morning." "Physically, yes, but you're so cold, honey. So distant." "It hurts Ava's feelings, you know? She tries so hard to include you." "We all do. But you make it impossible." I closed the dishwasher with more force than necessary. "I bought gifts. I showed up. I'm literally cleaning your kitchen right now. What else do you want from me?" Mom's expression hardened. "A better attitude would be a start. Some appreciation for everything we've done for you over the years." "Everything you've done," I repeated slowly, the words heavy with sarcasm. "Like what, specifically?" Her face flushed. "We raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. That's called being a parent," I shot back, my voice dangerously calm. "It's the legal minimum." "How dare you?" Her voice trembled with outrage. "After everything, you stand there and disrespect me like this?" I turned back to the sink, my hands shaking slightly. "I'm not doing this today." "Of course not," she sneered. "You never want to do anything that requires actual emotional maturity. That's why you're alone. Nobody can stand being around someone so selfish." The words landed like physical blows, but I'd heard variations of them countless times before. I finished rinsing the plates in silence, Mom standing there, seemingly waiting for me to apologize or break down. When I did neither, she huffed and walked away. The afternoon dragged on. The kids napped. Daniel and Dad watched football. Ava helped Mom prepare dinner. I sat in a corner reading a book on my phone, trying to ignore the pointed looks and whispered conversations clearly about me. Around 4, financial anxiety reared its ugly head again. Dad mentioned property taxes coming due. Mom worried aloud about whether they could afford the cruise Ava had gifted them. "Maybe we should postpone it," Dad said reluctantly. "No." Ava looked stricken. "You have to go. I already paid for everything. We can't expect you to cover all our expenses, sweetheart," Mom lamented, ever the martyr. "You have your own family to think about." I kept my eyes glued to my phone, refusing to engage. "There has to be something we can do," Mom mused. "Maybe cut our prescription coverage." "Don't be ridiculous," Daniel interrupted, looking uncomfortable. "You need your medications." Ava's eyes drifted to me, then quickly away. "If only there was someone who could help," she said, her voice a little too loud. "Someone without children to support or a spouse to consider. Someone with disposable income." The room went quiet. Even the football announcers seemed to lower their volume. Dad cleared his throat. "We would never ask our children for money." That wouldn't be right, Mom added quickly. But if someone offered, out of the goodness of their heart and a sense of family obligation, well, that would be different. I looked up from my phone. How much? Everyone's head swiveled towards me. Ava's eyebrows rose. How much what? How much money do you need? Dad shifted in his recliner. Well, that's hard to say exactly. The property taxes are around 4,000, and the credit cards have maybe 6,000 combined, plus the boat payment is 500 a month. And so, roughly 15,000 would clear everything immediate, I calculated quickly. And maybe another 6,000 annually for ongoing boat payments. Mom's eyes gleamed. That would certainly solve our problems. Of course, we couldn't accept such generosity unless you were absolutely sure. I'm not offering, I said calmly. I'm just clarifying the scope of your financial mismanagement. The gleam in her eyes died instantly. Excuse me. You heard me. You're in this mess because you've made one irresponsible choice after another. The boat you can't afford, the kitchen renovation you didn't need, the timeshare, all of it. And now you want me to bail you out? I've been watching this train wreck for 4 months now, documenting every guilt trip and manipulation. Dad's face turned crimson. We don't want anything from you. Really? Because for the past 6 months, every conversation we've had includes some mention of your money troubles. Every family gathering features a performance about heating bills or grocery costs. You've made your expectations crystal clear. Ava stood up, her jaw clenched. Mom and Dad have given you everything. The least you could do is help them in their time of need. Everything. I repeated, my voice rising. They've given me everything? Tell me, Ava, who paid for your wedding? She blinked, caught off guard. That's different. Who made the down payment on your house? We paid them back. Daniel interjected weakly. Did you? I countered, turning my gaze to him. Because Dad mentioned at Thanksgiving that you still owed $12,000 on that loan. Daniel's face went pale. Dad shot him a look that could melt steel. I continued, the words tumbling out, years of suppressed resentment finally finding their voice. Who watches your kids 3 days a week for free? Who bought you the minivan when your old car died? Who paid for that European vacation you took for your anniversary? Family helps family. Mom said defensively, desperation creeping into her voice. That's what people do. Interesting theory, I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. So when I asked to borrow $3,000 for my apartment deposit, why did Dad tell me I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet? You were 24 years old. Dad snapped. It was time you stopped expecting handouts. But Ava was 26 when you paid for her wedding, which cost over $40,000. Silence crashed through the room, heavy and suffocating. The twins stirred on the couch, but didn't wake. This is what I'm talking about, Mom said, her voice shaking with anger. This jealousy, this bitterness. It's poisoning you. I'm not jealous. I'm pointing out the double standard that's existed my entire life. Ava crossed her arms. Maybe there's a reason we get treated differently. Maybe it's because I actually appreciate what Mom and Dad do for me instead of throwing it back in their faces. You appreciate it? I laughed without humor. You expect it. There's a difference. Dad stood up, his hands clenched into fists. I think you should leave. I was planning to right after dinner. No. Now, Chloe. The room spun slightly. I'd expected anger, but the cold finality in his voice caught me off guard. Mom moved to stand beside him, a united front of parental disapproval. We've tried so hard with you, given you chance after chance to be part of this family, but all you do is criticize and complain. I've literally been sitting quietly all day. Your silence is judgmental, Ava added, her eyes flashing. We can all feel it. Daniel nodded in agreement, though he looked deeply uncomfortable. Dad took a step forward, his voice low and dangerous. Paying bills doesn't buy you a place in this family. Love, respect, gratitude, those are what matter. And you've shown none of them. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Which bills are we talking about, Dad? I challenged, my voice unwavering. Yours or mine? His face went purple. Chloe, right now. Before I say something I'll regret. I stood slowly, setting my phone down on the side table. Before you say something you'll regret? That's rich. Mom's expression twisted into something ugly. Stop envying your sister. It's pathetic. Just because you failed at creating a life worth living doesn't mean you get to drag the rest of us down with your misery. The words should have hurt. Maybe once upon a time, they would have. Instead, I felt something unlock inside my chest. Some final, heavy chain breaking. I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. Then pay your own bills. The color drained from both their faces. Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Mom actually took a step backward. What are you talking about? Ava demanded. I picked up my purse. Your parents have been telling everyone they're financially independent, comfortable retirees living within their means. But that's not quite true, is it? Dad found his voice a strangled whisper. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Should we discuss the mortgage you took out last year? The one you told everyone was a home equity line of credit for renovations. Mom's hand flew to her throat. We did renovate, she insisted, her voice thin. After paying off the $17,000 in credit card debt you'd accumulated, the debt from the Florida timeshare deal that fell through, the boat down payment, and Mom's new car lease. How do you know about any of that? Dad's voice had gone quiet, dangerous. I shrugged. I'm a financial analyst. It's literally my job to understand money. Plus, you used me as a reference on the mortgage application. The bank called to verify my information. Ava looked between our parents with growing confusion. You said you own the house outright. We do, Mom insisted, though her eyes darted nervously. Essentially. We just needed a small loan to manage some temporary cash flow issues. $140,000 isn't small, I said, my voice cutting through the facade. And it's not temporary when you're retired on a fixed income and can barely make the monthly payments. Dad's face had gone from purple to white. You had no right to discuss our private financial business with anyone. I haven't discussed it with anyone, I countered, until now. But since you've decided to kick me out of the family for refusing to fund your lifestyle, I figured we might as well be honest about why you really wanted me here. Daniel stood up. Maybe we should all calm down. Shut up, Daniel, I said pleasantly, without even looking at him. This doesn't concern you. He sat back down abruptly. I turned to Ava. Did you know that the boat you convinced Dad to co-sign for, the one he's making $500 monthly payments on? Daniel hasn't made a single payment himself. Not one. Dad's been covering it entirely. Daniel's face went red. I've been meaning to start contributing. Business has been slow. Business has been slow for 18 months, I finished for him. Interesting. Almost as long as you've had the boat. Ava looked at her husband with something close to betrayal in her eyes. You told me you were paying for it. I am. I mean, I will. I just needed some time to get back on my feet after the investment didn't pan out. What investment? She asked slowly, her gaze fixed on Daniel. The cryptocurrency thing, I supplied helpfully. The one where he lost $40,000 last March. Daniel shot up again. How could you possibly know about that? You told me, I said, meeting his furious gaze calmly, when you called asking to borrow money to cover the loss before Ava found out. The room exploded. Ava started yelling at Daniel, who defended himself by pointing out she'd spent $15,000 redecorating their house without consulting him. Mom tried to play peacemaker while simultaneously shooting me looks of pure hatred. Dad just stood there, his hands shaking with impotent rage. I headed toward the door, stepping over scattered wrapping paper and discarded toys. Merry Christmas, everyone. Thanks for a lovely holiday. You vindictive witch. Mom hissed, her voice dripping with venom. You couldn't stand seeing us happy, so you had to ruin everything. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I'm not the one who ruined anything. You all did that yourselves. I just stopped pretending not to notice. Dad moved toward me with alarming speed. For a moment, I thought he might actually get physical. If you leave now, you're not welcome back. Ever. Somehow I said, a strange calm settling over me, I think I'll survive. I walked out into the cold December evening, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The drive home took 30 minutes, during which my phone buzzed constantly with incoming texts. I ignored all of them. My apartment was dark and quiet when I arrived, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I woke to 73 missed calls and 42 text messages. Most were from Mom and Ava, alternating between fury and clumsy attempts at manipulation. A few were from relatives I barely knew, people Mom had apparently called to share her version of events. I deleted them all without reading and made myself breakfast. Around 10, someone knocked on my door. I checked the peephole and saw Dad standing in the hallway, dressed in his church clothes and looking grim. I opened the door. "What do you want?" "We need to talk." I think we said everything that needed saying yesterday. He pushed past me into the apartment without invitation. I considered forcing him out but decided against it. Let him say his piece and leave. "You embarrassed your mother," he began, his voice tight with controlled anger. "In front of your sister and her husband. You aired our private business and caused a massive fight that lasted until past midnight." Sounds exhausting. This isn't funny. You've torn this family apart with your selfishness and jealousy. I closed the door and leaned against it. "Is that all? I want you to apologize to your mother, your sister, and Daniel. I want you to admit that you were wrong and commit to making things right." "Or what?" He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. "Or I press charges." I stared at him. "Charges for what?" "Fraud, identity theft, illegal access to financial information." He unfolded the paper, which appeared to be some kind of police report form he'd printed off the internet. "You admitted yesterday to accessing our mortgage information without permission. You obtained private details about our financial situation through fraudulent means." That's a crime. The sheer absurdity made me laugh out loud. "I was listed as a reference on your mortgage application. The bank called me. There was no fraud involved. You had no right to keep that information or use it against us." "Against you," I countered, my voice sharp. "I kept the information to myself for over a year. I only mentioned it when you kicked me out of the house for refusing to give you money." Dad's jaw clenched. "That's not how it happened." "That's exactly how it happened." "But sure, Robert, go ahead and file a police report. I'm certain the officers will be very interested in hearing why you're so upset about me knowing the truth about your finances." He stepped closer, trying to intimidate me with his height. "You think you're so smart, so much better than the rest of us. But you're alone, and you'll stay alone because nobody can love someone as cold and calculating as you." The words still didn't hurt the way he wanted them to. "Are we done here?" "Apologize, or I'm going to the police station right now." I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder. "Before you do that, you might want to look at these." He took the folder suspiciously. "What is this?" "Documentation. Bank statements, loan documents, mortgage information, all obtained legally through public records and information I was entitled to as a listed reference. There's also a timeline of every conversation we've had over the past 4 months where you've hinted about needing money, transcripts of text messages from Mom asking me to help out the family, and a detailed breakdown of the financial gifts you've given Ava over the past 10 years compared to what you've given me, which totals exactly 0. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. "Why would you compile all this?" "Because I'm a financial analyst and I document things. It's what I do. And because somewhere around month 2 of your endless guilt trips, I realized you were building up to something big. I wanted to be prepared." Dad threw the folder on my coffee table. "This proves nothing except that you're paranoid and obsessed with keeping score. It proves that I never accessed anything illegally. It also proves a pattern of financial favoritism and attempted manipulation. So, if you want to go to the police and accuse me of fraud, go ahead. But they're going to see all of this, and they're going to have questions about why you're really filing the report." He stood there, breathing heavily, clearly trying to figure out his next move. I softened my voice slightly, a genuine offer of peace. "Dad, I don't want to fight with you. I never did. I just wanted to be treated fairly. The same consideration you showed Ava, the same support and respect. That's all I ever wanted. You wanted us to fund your lifestyle. I wanted you to acknowledge my existence. There's a difference." He picked up the folder and tucked it back under his arm. "Your mother is devastated. Ava won't stop crying. You've destroyed this family. The family was already broken. I just stopped pretending it wasn't." Dad walked to the door, then turned back. "I'm still going to file that report. You'll see what happens when you cross your own blood." He left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frames on my walls. I made another cup of coffee and tried to focus on work emails, but my concentration was shot. The morning stretched into afternoon. Around 3, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Is this Chloe Miller?" A male voice asked. "Yes, this is." "This is Officer David Chin with the City Police Department. I'm calling regarding a report filed this morning by a Robert Miller. I understand he's your father." My stomach tightened. "That's correct. Mr. Miller has accused you of fraud and identity theft related to accessing his financial information. I'd like to ask you some questions about that if you have time." I took a breath. "Of course. I can come to the station if you'd like." "That won't be necessary right now. I just need to understand the situation. Your father claims you illegally obtained details about his mortgage and bank accounts. Can you explain how you came to have this information?" I walked Officer Chin through everything. The bank's phone call verifying me as a reference, the public records I pulled, the timeline of events. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making sounds of acknowledgement. When I finished, there was a long pause. "And you have documentation of all this?" "Yes, sir. Everything's properly filed and dated." Another pause. "Miss Miller, would you be willing to bring that documentation to the station today if possible?" "Absolutely." "When?" "As soon as you can get here. Your father and mother are currently in the waiting room. I'd like to address this situation with everyone present." My hands went cold. "They're both there?" "Yes, ma'am. They came in together this morning and have been here since." Your father seemed quite determined to pursue this matter. I grabbed my folder and keys. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. The police station was a squat brick building downtown. I found Officer Chen at the front desk, a middle-aged black man with kind eyes and an expression that suggested he'd seen every variety of human stupidity imaginable. "Miss Miller, that's me." He led me through a door into a small conference room where my parents sat on one side of a table. Mom's eyes were red from crying. Dad looked grimly satisfied, like he'd already won. "Please have a seat," Officer Chen said, gesturing to the chair across from them. I sat and placed my folder on the table. Dad's eyes fixated on it immediately. Officer Chin remained standing, his arms crossed. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I've spoken with your daughter about the allegations you've made. She's provided an explanation that differs significantly from yours. I'd like to give you both an opportunity to respond after I clarify a few things." Dad leaned forward, his voice stiff. "Officer, our daughter has committed a crime. She accessed our private financial information without permission and has been using it to blackmail us emotionally. We want her prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." "I understand that's your position. However, Miss Miller has documentation showing that she was listed as a reference on your mortgage application, that the bank contacted her directly, and that she pulled additional information from public records that anyone can access. Can you dispute any of those facts?" Mom's mouth opened and closed. Dad's confidence wavered slightly. "Even if the bank called her," Dad said, trying to regain his footing, "she had no right to keep that information or use it against us the way she did." Officer Chin nodded slowly. "Let me make sure I understand the sequence of events. You listed your daughter as a reference on a loan application. The bank contacted her to verify information, which is standard procedure. She then compiled additional publicly available financial information. Later, during a family gathering, you asked her to give you a substantial amount of money. When she refused, you told her to leave your home. In response, she mentioned that she knew about your financial situation. Does that accurately summarize what happened?" "She was cruel about it," Mom interjected, her voice cracking. "She threw our problems in our faces." "Ma'am, I'm not here to mediate family conflicts. I'm here to determine if a crime was committed. And based on everything I've heard and seen," he tapped the folder I brought, "no crime was committed." Dad's face went red. "But sir, your daughter was legally entitled to the information the bank provided her. She legally obtained public records. She documented conversations and text messages that you sent to her. None of that constitutes fraud or identity theft. Then what about harassment?" Mom demanded, her voice shrill. "She's been keeping files on us like we're criminals." Officer Chen's expression hardened slightly. Mrs. Miller, documenting interactions with family members isn't illegal. In fact, given the situation she's described, it was probably wise. He opened my folder and pulled out several pages, spreading them across the table where my parents could see. Text messages from Mom asking me to help out during this difficult time, emails from Robert hinting about financial struggles, records of gifts given to Ava compared to those given to me. What I'm seeing here, Officer Chen continued, his voice calm but firm, is a pattern of behavior that your daughter felt necessary to document for her own protection. That's not criminal. That's smart. Dad stood up abruptly. This is absurd. We came here because she broke the law. Officer Chen met his eyes steadily. No, sir. You came here because your daughter refused to give you money and then embarrassed you by pointing out facts you wanted kept hidden. That's not a police matter. That's a family therapy matter. The room went silent. Mom stared at the table, tears welling again. Dad looked like he might explode. Officer Chen gathered the papers back into the folder and handed it to me. Miss Miller, you're free to go. I apologize for your time being wasted on this. Thank you, officer. As I stood to leave, Officer Chen turned back to my parents. His expression had shifted from professional courtesy to something harder. Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I need to be very clear about something. Filing a false police report is a criminal offense. While I don't believe you acted with deliberately malicious intent, I do think you failed to consider the facts before making serious accusations against your daughter. If you attempt to file any additional reports regarding this matter, I will pursue charges for harassment and filing a false report. Do you understand? Robert opened his mouth, but no words came. Out. Do you understand? Officer Chen repeated, his voice leaving no room for doubt. Yes, Robert finally managed, a defeated whisper. Good. I suggest you all consider seeking professional family counseling rather than involving law enforcement in what is clearly a personal dispute. He held the door open for me. I walked through it without looking back at my parents, their faces frozen in shock and humiliation. Outside, the afternoon sun felt impossibly bright. I sat in my car for several minutes, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed with a text from Ava. Dad called and told me what happened at the police station. I can't believe you humiliated them like that. I deleted the message without responding. Over the next few days, my phone continued to explode with messages from extended family. Aunt Brenda called to yell at me about disrespecting my parents. Cousins I barely knew sent essays about family values and forgiveness. Even my grandmother weighed in, leaving a voicemail about how disappointed she was in my behavior. I blocked most of them. To the ones I didn't block, I sent a brief message. If you'd like to hear my side of the story, I'm happy to share it. Otherwise, please respect my boundaries. Only 2 people took me up on the offer. Aunt Brenda listened for about 3 minutes before interrupting to tell me I was making excuses. I hung up on her. My cousin, Olivia, however, actually listened to the whole story. Holy hell, she said when I finished. I knew your parents treated you differently than Ava, but I didn't realize it was this bad. Most people didn't. They're very good at maintaining appearances. What are you going to do now? Olivia asked. I looked around my quiet apartment, a sanctuary. Move on with my life. Same as always. The following weeks were strange. I went to work, came home, spent time with friends who actually valued me. The absence of my family's drama created a space I hadn't realized I needed. No more guilt trips about missing events. No more comparisons to my sister. No more walking on eggshells, trying not to offend people who were determined to be offended. Around mid-January, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized Mom's handwriting. Inside was a single page, covered in her tight cursive. The letter started with accusations. I was selfish, ungrateful, determined to destroy the family. It moved into self-pity. How could I treat them this way after everything they'd sacrificed? It ended with an ultimatum. Apologize and make things right, or never contact any of them again. I read it twice, then filed it with the rest of my documentation. February brought unexpected news. Olivia called to tell me that Ava and Daniel were separating. Apparently, The revelations about his cryptocurrency losses and lying about the boat payments had broken something fundamental in their relationship. Mom and Dad were devastated, Olivia said carefully, scrambling to provide support while dealing with their own financial crisis. They asked about you, whether you'd heard, and if you planned to reach out to Ava. To any of them. I thought about it, thought about extending an olive branch, offering sympathy, trying to rebuild some kind of relationship. Then I remembered Christmas morning. Dad's face as he told me to get out. Mom's words about me being too pathetic to love. No, I said, I don't think I will. I don't blame you, Olivia replied. Spring arrived with an unexpected development. Daniel contacted me directly, asking to meet for coffee. Against my better judgment, I agreed. He looked terrible, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. We sat in a corner booth at a chain cafe, both nursing drinks neither of us really wanted. I need to apologize, he began, his voice raspy, for everything. The boat, the lies, the way I stood by while your family treated you like garbage. Okay, I said simply. That's it? Just okay. He looked startled. What else do you want me to say? I accept your apology, but it doesn't change anything. Daniel ran his hand through his hair. I've been thinking a lot about that Christmas, about what you said and how everyone reacted. You were right about all of it. I know. The thing is, it was easy to go along with how they treated you. It took pressure off Ava and me. As long as you were the problem child, the difficult one, nobody looked too closely at our issues. That's probably the most honest thing anyone in my family has ever said to me. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, well, divorce has a way of forcing honesty. Your parents are furious with me, by the way. They blame me for everything falling apart. They would. They're also struggling hard financially. The boat got repossessed last month. They're looking at downsizing the house. I sipped my coffee and said nothing. Daniel leaned forward. I know I have no right to ask this, but are you planning to help them? They're drowning, and I think they're too proud to ask you directly after everything. They didn't ask me directly before. They just expected me to offer. So that's a no? I met his eyes steadily. Daniel, they called the police on me. They tried to have me arrested for fraud because I wouldn't give them money. They've spent months telling everyone who will listen that I'm a terrible person who destroyed the family. Why would I help them? Because they're your parents. That's not actually a reason. Being related to someone doesn't obligate you to fund their mistakes or tolerate their abuse. He sat back, looking deflated. I guess I hoped you were a bigger person than me. Being a bigger person is overrated. It's just another way of saying let people walk all over you while you smile and pretend it doesn't hurt. We finished our coffee in silence. Before leaving, Daniel handed me an envelope. This is the money your dad paid on the boat. All of it. Everything I owed him. It took me selling almost everything I owned, but it's all there. I looked at the envelope without taking it. That's between you and him. He won't accept it from me. But maybe if it came from you. No. Please. I need to make this right. I stood up and grabbed my purse. Then make it right with him directly. I'm not your intermediary, and I'm not interested in being pulled back into their drama. I left him sitting there with his envelope full of guilt money. May brought warmer weather and an unexpected visitor. Ava showed up at my apartment on a Saturday afternoon, looking tired but determined. We need to talk, she said when I opened the door. Do we? Please, 5 minutes. I let her in, mostly out of curiosity. She sat on my couch and looked around my apartment like she'd never seen it before. Maybe she hadn't. I couldn't remember the last time she'd visited. The divorce is final next week, she said abruptly. And I've been going to therapy. Good for you. My therapist thinks I need to apologize to you. She says I've been complicit in Mom and Dad's favoritism and that I've benefited from them treating you poorly. I sat in the chair across from her. Your therapist is right. Ava's eyes filled with tears. I knew, okay? I always knew they treated you differently. I just didn't want to think about it too hard because it meant admitting I was part of the problem. You were more than part of it. You actively participated. Every snide comment, every comparison, every time you took their side against me. I know. The tears spilled over. I was jealous of you. That actually surprised me. Jealous of... What? Your independence. Your career, the way you never needed their approval the way I did. I've spent my whole life trying to be the perfect daughter, and you just existed on your own terms. It made me crazy. I didn't know what to say to that. Ava wiped her eyes. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to understand how messed up our family dynamics are. How messed up they still are. Unless Mom and Dad have had some kind of revelation I'm not aware of? She shook her head. They're still convinced you're the villain in all this. Mom especially. She's written this whole narrative where you deliberately destroyed the family out of jealousy and spite. Of course, she has. I tried talking to them about it, about how they've treated you over the years. Dad hung up on me. Mom cried and said I was being cruel. They don't want to acknowledge it. That would require admitting they were wrong, and people like them can't handle that. Ava nodded slowly. My therapist says that too. She says some people would rather maintain their delusions than face uncomfortable truths about themselves. We sat in silence for a moment. For what it's worth, Ava said quietly, breaking the silence. I'm sorry for all of it. For every cruel comment, every time I stood by while they hurt you, every moment I benefited from their favoritism and pretended not to notice. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry. The apology felt sincere. It also felt about 10 years too late. Thank you for saying that, I finally replied. It means something. Not enough to fix things, but something. I understand. She stood up to leave and hesitated. If you ever wanted to try having a relationship, just us, separate from Mom and Dad, I'd like that. Maybe someday, but not right now. That's fair. After she left, I sat in the quiet apartment, feeling oddly hollow. Part of me had wanted to slam the door in her face, to reject her apology the way they'd rejected me for years. But the larger part just felt tired. Tired of being angry, tired of carrying around the weight of their dysfunction. Summer arrived, and with it came more news through the family grapevine. Mom and Dad had sold their house and moved into a small condo. The boat was gone, the timeshare abandoned, and they declared bankruptcy to clear their credit card debt. Extended family had rallied to help them, donating furniture and money to ease the transition. Nobody asked me to contribute. Nobody even told me directly. I heard it all through Olivia, who kept me updated despite my insistence that I didn't care. You do care, she said during one of our phone calls. You're just too stubborn to admit it. Even if I do, caring doesn't mean I need to do anything about it. True enough. 1 year after that Christmas morning, I received another letter. This one was from Robert, handwritten on plain paper. It started differently than Mom's had. No accusations, no demands, just a simple statement. I've been thinking about what happened, and I realize I owe you an apology. The letter went on for 3 pages. He acknowledged the favoritism, the unreasonable expectations, the way they tried to manipulate me into funding their lifestyle. He admitted that calling the police had been vindictive and wrong. He even apologized for years of subtle and not-so-subtle emotional abuse. The letter ended with a request, not a demand or an ultimatum, but a simple question: would you be willing to meet for coffee and talk? I read it several times over the course of a week. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the boundaries I'd worked so hard to establish. Another part was curious whether this represented genuine change or just another manipulation. In the end, I sent a brief reply, I'll think about it. Whether I ever actually meet him for that coffee remains to be seen. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. But maybe they can be replaced with something new, something built on honesty instead of obligation. Or maybe not. Maybe some families are better loved from a distance, their dysfunction acknowledged but not engaged with. Either way, I'm finally free to make that choice on my own terms. And that, more than any apology or reconciliation, feels like the real victory. So, what do you think? After everything, is it possible to truly rebuild with people who've hurt you so deeply, or is some distance the healthiest path? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.